Good morning everyone, and welcome to the second session in our lockdown learning series of free business continuity webinars. It's great to see so many of you attending these webinars, and we do hope they're keeping you entertained during these strange and uncertain times. So welcome to those rejoining us, and also those who are joining for the first time. Before we start, I would just like to mention we are running several of our training courses in a live online environment over the next few weeks, and we are offering 20% off any BCI live online courses booked in April and May. We also have further discounts available, including 2-for-1 offers on our range of e-learning. Please visit the website or get in touch with the team if you'd like any further information. So today's webinar is Avoiding Groupthink, Observations on Decision-Making During a Crisis, and will be presented by BC Training and PlanB Consulting Director, Charlie Maclean-Bristol. We'll have a short Q&A at the end of the session. If you'd like to ask Charlie any questions, you just need to type it into the question box on the control panel to the right of your screen. We will be sending out a recording of the webinar later today in case you missed any of the session. So I think we're ready to begin, and I will hand you over to Charlie. Charlie, you have control.
Right. I'm hoping that's all working for yourselves. Good morning. I'll just do a little bit of chat. Just we're waiting just a few more people to come in. So it's Friday. I'm hoping this is going to start you easing into the weekend. I hope that some of you have got, or most of you got your days organized so you're differentiating between the work week and the weekend, so that you've got something exciting organized for this weekend, or something to look forward to. Anyway,
sorry, can I just interrupt you there? Can we see Charlie's screen? Is it just me that can't see it? Another moderator, can you just let me know? The other moderators seem to be very quiet.
Could someone just do it as a chat on the chat thing, if they can just see my screen?
No, it's a blank screen at the minute.
All right. Oh, there we are. Right, let's just see.
Right, just bear with us for a couple of seconds. You get your screen up. Oh, there we go. Right, we've got a bit of a screen. Do you want to share your desktop now, Charlie?
Is that working?
Nope. Oh, yeah. And make it, and go to slideshow, view slideshow.
Yeah.
It's not liking that for some strange reason. Seems to be when you click on slideshow. Just go down to the next one and just do that, maybe.
I'll try that one. No. You can see it at the moment.
You can see it at the moment, but there's no.
So let me try and make a slideshow again. Is that working?
Nope.
You'll take back presenter and make me presenter again.
Right. Okay. Just 1 second.
I'll give all these people a second to come on.
Right. Okay. Sorry for those who are just attending. We're just overcoming a few. I should say one.
Is that coming up now?
Okay. Right. So let's Charlie Maclean-Bristol will make you presenter again, and let's see what happens. Do you want to show your screen again, please? There we go. Okay, don't touch anything. Right, I'm going to leave you to it.
The joys of computers. A crisis averted. So what I want to do is, thank you for waiting patiently. What we're going to do is speak this morning about groupthink and decision making during a crisis. And as I said in my sort of blurb, that might be quite useful for a few of you at the moment. So what we're going to do is I want to talk about my sort of quest for decision making. So I want to talk about that. A couple of examples of groupthink in action. And then I really want the main sort of bulk of this morning's chat is to talk to you about what are the 8 symptoms. So what is out there to recognize that groupthink is taking place, and then some measures to avoid it. So what you can do in your organization, in your crisis management teams, to avoid being on groupthink. And I think if you want to read a bit more, this is an excellent paper. I think it's 1977, 1978 by Karen Swite and Ian Vertsky, called Design on Crisis Decision Units. I think if you ferret around the internet, you should be able to find a free copy of it or look at it. But I think there's some really good stuff there on decision making on stress, and some good stuff on groupthink. So quite a lot of the stuff has been taken from that paper, and I think that's, you know, if you want to go back to originals and read a bit on it, then that's a paper that's well worth reading. One of the things, having been an army person myself, I did staff college. So the army is designed for managing crises, managing incidents, fighting wars, and the sort of decision-making process and the framework within which for managing crises, battles, all the things the army do, is kind of very formalized as a strong structure, and you practice it lots, and you have to be taught how to do it. And if you look at some of the sort of police or fire brigade or ambulance, or if you look at the kind of the FEMA type emergency management from the States, they are all quite rigid, quite formalized, quite complex ways of managing incidents, and they work because people are trained in them, they practice them, and it's like a full-time profession for them. What I've always struggled with in a sort of business continuity crisis management is to say, how do you teach a senior executive who's used to managing, in inverted commas, in peacetime crisis, or they're managing sort of their peacetime business without a crisis taking place? How do you get them to manage a crisis which could actually cause the demise of their organization, could cause the demise of their career, and when they will only give you half a day a year's worth of training or half a day a year's worth of exercise? And, you know, that's, speak to a lot of people, the more enlightened ones will give you more time, but they are not going to go on a 6-month course like I did in the army, or army people do on staff college, how to organize sort of incidents. So you're going to have always with your senior managers, you're going to have a very limited contact time, or time which they're willing to devote to this. So what I've always been on my sort of slightly the quest, and that's why I had a quest, is tools and techniques and ways of doing things which are simple but effective, but you can teach to senior managers, which they can say, oh, I remember that training. Yeah, let's use that little tool. Let's use that technique, because actually that's going to add value to my incident and make my incident response better. And so that's that bit. Incident damage, you know, it's run by amateurs. There's a lack of training, and so I'm trying to look at tools available. And the reason I just put this up is one of the things I'm looking at decision making. So how do you get senior executives in incidents to make better decisions? And, you know, that is the Jessup. So that is the interoperability UK methodology of sort of managing incidents. So that's your decision making cycle. And you can see you gather intelligence and information, and then you can go around the circle. Then you've got adoptions and contingencies. again, for me, that's fine for people who are trained in using it. But, you know, if you stuck that in front of an executive when they're kind of, the heart's going, there's a crisis going, things are happening, bad things are piling upon bad things, and you say, right, there you are, there's a nice sort of circle for you to go around. Even if you've managed to teach them this and they've taken the time to understand it, are they going to remember how to do it? So one of my problems is yeah, there's some really great tools such as this decision-making cycle out there, but actually it's not going to be that much use for executives on the day. So what I've been in kind of looking out for is simple things that you can teach, which they can use. And sort of when I read this paper on groupthink, that was something to say, right, there's something there that's conceptually quite simple, but we can take, and when we come onto the measures there, you can take those measures, or your crisis teams can take those measures, or you can suggest your crisis team takes those measures, which I think would help them avoid some of the disasters you find in caused by groupthink. So simple tools and techniques there. Groupthink was developed by Irving Janis in 1972, so he was born in 1918, so he served in the Second World War, and his job in the Second World War was to look at morale and to look at decision making and to do research during the war. And so this is in the end his kind of synopsis work. If you look on Amazon, that's just a cut and paste from Amazon, so the book's out there if you want to read the original. And he did his original in 1972, and then again in 1982. So this is not kind of dreamed up last week. This is quite a sort of generally well-established theory. Now his theory, when he wrote his original book, he looked at Pearl Harbor and he looked at the Bay of Pigs. So Pearl Harbor, massive failure of American intelligence, that many people knew the Japanese were coming to attack them, and there was a high possibility of this, but due to failure of command, that basically a large amount of the American fleet was destroyed at port in Pearl Harbor. So a large failure of intelligence there. So his book looked at why that happened. And again, with the Bay of Pigs, 1961, this was the American-led invasion by a whole load of Cuban exiles, and basically the invasion failed, but they didn't have enough troops. The intelligence wasn't great, and actually bolstered Castro and kept the Castro regime on this basically myth going till this day. And again, massive failure of intelligence, not enough troops, not enough and not enough thought went into it, while there were people saying this is not a good idea. So those were the two sort of apocryphal stories that he used, and he went into very much in the detail of who thought what and when and why these decisions were making, and making the point lots of people were saying around, this is not a good idea, have you thought of this? And they were ignored. And for me, a sort of a great classic, and then quite interesting Second World War history, was the German invasion of Russia. Stalin believed that Russians wouldn't attack him. So basically, as the reports came in from spies to say, look, I can see German tanks and artillery pieces on the other side of the border getting ready to invade us. And this wasn't one source, this was multiple sources. And basically, those sources were ignored. And so the Russians were caught flat-footed there, and the Germans were able to invade a lot further than they would do if the forces were ready for it. So massive failure. You know, you can't hide the thousands of tanks that was there, but if you ignore the spies, you ignore your intelligence, then you're caught out. And I wonder if it's a little bit, and I haven't got, we'll wait until the report, there'll be a report on coronavirus at the moment. It seemed to me a little bit, the British government was caught flat-footed on this. And I don't know what the politics there and how the story went. Sometimes, you can see a disaster coming, but you can't actually turn around and put things in place because things take time. But I think in the coronavirus, for during January, we saw that this was spreading in China, was getting worse, and it didn't seem to me till about sort of beginning of March that we really sort of geared up and started to doing things about it. Now, whether this is groupthink or a failure to see it, or people were doing things, I'm not sure, but I think it seems to me in my sort of gut feels about that again, this sort of groupthink. And I think there's a few elements of this once we come into the kind of the 8 symptoms of groupthink, I think might resonate with you, and you think, oh, yeah, maybe actually that this was what's happening there. There's a definition from the Cambridge English Business Dictionary, but I think it's all about bad decisions. And this is bad decisions, not because I think the key point of this is about, it's not just people taking bad decisions. People take bad decisions all the time, and it might be nothing to do with groupthink, but it's bad decisions based upon a group dynamics, which people, as you can see there, don't want to express opinions, suggest new ideas, and others disagree with. So it's that what's important in recognizing groupthink is about a group, and it's about taking bad decisions when there's some people saying that was a bad decision, and actually almost in retrospect, if they kind of looked at themselves and said, yeah, actually, what were we thinking? Why did we make that decision? It was fairly obvious that was a bad decision, but we as groupthink, and that's not even about hindsight, that's about, look, we knew all this stuff and we still took that decision. Why did we take that decision? So I think you need to differentiate a little bit when looking at groupthink, it's just bad decision making, or decision making in disasters, which we all know you've got to take a decision with limited information. Then that might be the wrong decision. So it's more about this bad decisions, and it's more about groups than just taking bad decisions. Right, so let's go to some symptoms. There is on business continuity training or the PlanB website, this has been written up as a blog, so you can go and find it on there, or you can go back to the original. So don't worry too much about the text there. But the first one is this illusion of invincibility, high exit optimists, and decisions of very high risks. So basically you have that kind of group euphoria. We've been really successful, where it's all going well. Yeah, this very high risk decision comes on and they just go, yeah, bam, that's what we're going to do. And I think I asked for a couple of examples from our consultants there, and I think Jill came up with a very good idea, was a little bit about banking pre the crisis. Everyone's making lots of money, banks are booming, everything is going well, we got this, we can sell this, we're selling a whole load of the mortgages packed up, as long as the mortgage, the house prices keep going on, it doesn't matter whether these guys can afford it, and that kind of, the world is going to boom forever. And it suddenly came onto, and the banks were taking lots of risks, which they were making lots of money, it was going well, been very successful up to date, and then bam, fall off the edge of the cliff, and we get the kind of global financial crisis. So that's one of the first things. Very successful groups going really well, and then they take higher and higher risk decisions without really thinking about, say, actually, have we looked at the risk if this decision goes wrong? Have we looked at the risk of it? But, been successful in the past, why shouldn't we be successful in the future? So it's that sort of optimism, that kind of, yeah, we're doing great, and then they don't kind of like be the self-aware to say, actually, are we getting in a place where we're taking these higher risks? Because we need to feed on that optimism. You know, some of the small risks we've taken in the past have paid off. So the bigger risks, yeah, that's to say, I'm sure we'll do it fine. So it's this excessive optimism. I think the next thing is warnings, negative feedback, which reassessment of decisions. So basically, very much like the Stalin and Barossa and the Russians, you know, there were warnings coming to say, spies were saying, you know, the Russians are massing here, the Germans are massing here, we can see the troops, we can see the troop movements, we see the trains turning out, we see the tanks unloading, and then people, and they just ignore the warnings. They say, you know, no, that would never happen, that would never happen, that couldn't happen, and those people are just routinely ignored. Now, they may, quite often, those people may be sort of more junior, and so, well, you know, he's the health and safety manager, you know, he's always moaning about risks, he's always moaning about, you know, the scaffolding is not put together properly, but, you know, he's just the moaner, so we'll just ignore him. And those ignorings are, you know, the people ignored, and then actually the incident happens. And then when, you know, kind of everyone will say, well, why didn't we listen to them? Well, you didn't. So anything that, if you've got a group view, anything that kind of goes against your group view, you kind of rationalize it and say, well, that would never happen, that couldn't happen. Maybe it's a little bit with sort of business continuity and pandemic, you know, pandemic will never happen. You know, last pandemic, everyone was saying it was going to be really bad, and you know, when H1N1 came along, it wasn't very bad, so why are we bothering? And you know, so ignore the state, rationalize the status quo. I think this is an interesting one, and I don't know the dynamics of it, but it seems to me is fitting the Volkswagen one. Very successful, Volkswagen, very successful, sells lots of good cars, you know, and suddenly, you know, the engineers are quite happy to go away and skew the results of the emissions test. And, you know, did no one ever say to them that that's wrong? We're going to get caught, you know, we shouldn't be doing that. And so I suspect there was some sort of group dynamics there that said, look, we're doing the best for the company. We're doing, I'm sure they didn't make, you know, personally, the people didn't make any money out of it, but, you know, they were caught up in this, and they didn't think about the moral consequences. They didn't just think what we are doing is wrong. We are cheating. We're cheating customers. We're cheating the company. We're cheating the shareholders. So it is, teams can invent their own moralities, and if you kind of took an outside view of that team morality, you might say that team is just doing something that is just not right. So again, about morality is about, you know, they're constructing their own, well, that's acceptable, you know, everyone else is doing it. They kind of rationalize bad behavior. I think this one maybe is connected, COVID-19, coronavirus, is that you look at who you're up against and you go, you know, they're the Chinese. There's lots of Chinese, you know. The Chinese are not as sophisticated as us, you know. They can't deal with this virus is not as bad as we thought it was. We've kind of, you know, it kills a few old people. So you kind of rationalize it and say it's not as bad as everybody's thinking, you know. Was there some xenophobia there? And to say, you know, that happens in China, but it wouldn't happen over here, you know, we've got better healthcare. And I think, you know, you kind of underestimate your opponent or underestimate maybe other people who've dealt with it and kind of think, actually, well, you know, we'd of course deal with it much better. So it happens to us, we'd be prepared. And I think, again, you end up with saying, oh, yeah, we're fine. and then you suddenly realize, well, it comes to it, and you kind of say, whoa, actually, this is much worse than we ever thought, and we try to rationalize it away. So that's number 4. Express doubts, course of actions, arguments sorted by majority. So people don't look at the downsides, they don't think about the downsides, and if you're in the group, you don't even want to sort of, everyone's saying this, and maybe this could be a little bit if you had a kind of, maybe you've got a crisis management team which consists of your top management who work together all the time. So they're kind of quite a tight-knit group. And as part of your crisis plan, you might have some additional people who come into the crisis team. You might have the lawyers who don't normally get there, the business continuity person there, maybe the PR, the director of communications doesn't normally get into the doesn't get into the sort of the top management group, and they come into the team and they're listening to the team and saying, look, I'm not really sure that this is right, but they don't want to speak up because these guys ought to know what they're doing. You know, they're senior managers, and I haven't worked with this team before, so they're right, and I don't really want to express my kind of downside against this, just in case I'm made to feel stupid or I'm sacked from the team, or, you know. So people, and again with senior managers, it's quite a hierarchical, you know, I'm only this manager, can I really tell the chief executive that his or her ideas are not very good? So, you know, there may be implicit pressure for not to say something. So I don't suggest you say that, you know, that'll upset will set the boss. You know, if you think about the Trump regime, would you really want to question the president when you know the president doesn't like people going against him? And actually, if you're going to get a double barrel in against you with some mocking of you, mocking of, and then, you know, he's tweeting out that to all his supporters, and then, you know, you've got a vast army of people who are turning against you because you say, oh, you know, Charlie Maclean-Bristol, you know, that he's kind of being slated by Trump in his tweets. Well, yeah, he must be a bad guy, Charlie Maclean-Bristol. So we're gonna think about that, and we're going to pile in on him, or we're going to troll him, and all that sort of thing. So people in that sort of regime don't want to speak up because they know there's a consequences, and if they're right, they know there's the consequences of going against the boss. So that produces a classic kind of group thing. You don't want to speak up, even if you know their direction, the path they are taking is going to lead them off a cliff, but you don't say because you're encouraged, I'd encourage not to say, or that you don't want to because the consequences for you personally may be too great. Keep quiet about their doubts. So, you know, people in that sort of regime, just like number 5, they just don't want to speak out, and so they just don't bother doing it. They also have this illusion, if we all agree, then that must be the truth. So actually, it doesn't matter if I'm having doubts about it, I'm not going to express it because everyone else is agreeing to that. And the last one is where this idea of mind guards who shield people against people who, so they make sure if you've got a chief of staff who controls access to the chief executive, or you've got a sort of tactical team which briefs the strategic team, and there is some problems in the operational end, or they've discovered a big problem, or the plan is not working, then they kind of censor the information coming up from your operational teams, and so that they don't push up bad news from the bottom, because actually they don't want the boss or they don't want the strategic team to know what's going on, because it will represent failure and they'll get angry and upset and the rest of it. So they kind of, these people, either like chiefs of staff or whether they're a sort of team, may censor the information coming up to suit the picture. And I think I just wanted to mention when we come about number 3 there is about if you look again at Boeing and the Max crash, you know, there must be people in Boeing who said, well, look, we've had one crash, this is going to happen again, but for whatever reason, that decision wasn't taken, whether that was, you know, and I'm not sure what level that decision was taken, but again, that decision wasn't taken because, you know, maybe they were pushing more for money rather than actually saying the moral decision is to ground this because this software is unsafe. So, you know, you look at a lot of these things and say, you know, these are obvious. Why would anyone do that? But I think the reason why I think this is important, why I put in this webinar, is so that maybe you, if you're involved in a response or involved in an exercise, is to kind of take a step back and say, are these things happening? And actually, maybe you want to point out to the team and say, look, you know, I've done a bit of thinking, groupthink. I think we're going down the groupthink void. Can I suggest we do a couple of things, which I'll come on to now, to stop this happening and make us make better decisions? So you can see the solution. You see, I have an idea. You can see the one on the left, and then I've got some ideas from this paper about how you can avoid it. So one of the ideas is to say, if you've got a strategic team, tactical team, doesn't matter what the team is, and what you do is before making a decision, say, look, actually, why don't you go and discuss this decision with your team? This is the decision we'd like to make. Can you go and discuss it with your team to decide if there's any flaws in it? So it's taking a little bit of a step back from that decision and say, you know, we're in a crisis situation. We need a quick decision. We can't take 3 days to kind of pull the company and decide and test it and get a few focus groups and things to do that. But actually say, right, we need to make a decision in the next hour. This is what we think you're doing. Can you go and discuss that with your teams? Take 20 minutes, come back and see if anybody's got any issues or any major problems with this. So it's trying to get more people involved in the decision or running against some different people, maybe some experts there who say, look, there's a flaw here you haven't thought of. Yes, very good point. We forgot about that. So discussed externally with their own team to verify, challenge the situation. Quite like this idea is using some tools like brainstorming or something where people can have a thought and then present their thought without having just saying, you know, the strongest, the very vocal person says their thoughts and everyone just nods, not allowing the other people to do this. One of the sort of tools and techniques we have for when we're doing team meetings, and this works pretty well. We even do this at strategic level. Is what we say is once we've done the introducing the meeting, we get each individual person around the table to present for 2 or 3 minutes on what their issues are for this incident, what information they've got, what are their key issues, and what decisions they need made by the team. And what we say is to say you have to go around the entire table, so all 10 people in the team, before anybody's allowed to comment, contradict, say that's rubbish, whatever. So you get everybody to say their view, and you don't. And so what this avoids is the first person does their presentation, and then the loud person on the meeting say, "Oh, that's not very good," or "You haven't really thought," or "You're a bit stupid. Have you thought of that?" You know. And then nobody else wants to talk, or you've already got a plan before everybody else's plan is done there. So trying to, or even just under the chair of your meeting, go around the table and say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? and trying to get some other ideas rather than, yeah, just nodding and not even asking other people's opinion there. So brainstorming, give yourself, not be constrained by discussion, come up with some additional ideas. Often you find in incidents, although you've got your incident team, you quite often find that there may be one or two people who are not intimate, or they haven't got as much to do as the other people. Could be HR, could be finance, could be lawyers, it could be various other security. We have our security person on the team, but actually this is not a security issue. They're there because they're important to have a view. So you can actually designate a couple of people there to say, actually, can you go and have a look at the long-term situation there? Can you go and think about longer term? And then they can come back. And, as a part of a scene, you should set your incident objectives. So can you think about the longer term? And then they can go and say, well, look, if you do that, we've got our objectives, we've thought about the long-term thing, this is not going to contribute to it. So you might want to reconsider that situation. So try and look at it as the longer term issues. If you think about the Volkswagen thing, if they kind of thought, actually, if we're cheating on the emissions, this is not going to help us in the long term. This is going to knock lots of money off the share price. And the reason why we're doing this is to sell more cars, to make the cars more attractive, to make the company more money. Then this is actually going to be detrimental for it. So actually, this doesn't fit into the long-term view. I like this other idea, get one person the role of devil advocate and challenge the group decision. Now, often there is that person already on the team who you find blastedly annoying, and actually, yeah, you're always complaining, you're never happy, you're always challenging the throw, but actually you need that person on the team, even how annoying they are, because you want to get on and do things, you think it's a reasonable idea and they're still moaning about it. But I think it is, again, is to have that person either designated or, it's almost a little bit like a war game, is to say, actually, this is the red team who's going to think about actually what are the flaws in our solutions, and that's designated roles. We're not just being annoying. We've principally asked this person, these couple of people, to challenge what we're saying, and again, that would help define the decision and make it better. As you say, rotate it, just stop becoming domesticated. Again, more exercises you do, the more muscle memory you get, hopefully the better decisions you get. And also, that also gives people to say, look, we tried that in an exercise before, we did that real incident before, that didn't seem to work. Are we falling into the same trap as we did in exercise? Phoenix, that's always a good name for an exercise. So are you, give yourself some examples, something to look back on, some experience to look back on, and then you can say, look, that we tried that before and it didn't really work very well in the exercise. Are we going to, are we falling into the same trap again here? And I think again here is, I'm a consultant, I would say that, but why not use external crisis communications consultants or even crisis communications consultants to sit alongside the team and give that experience, to challenge the team, to ask questions, to provide advice. In the end, they can provide advice, they can challenge, but it does give you a kind of somebody from outside, the nice cozy consensus, who can actually maybe see a different view and challenge your ideas and think about it. In the end, it's your organization, so you're the people going to make the decision, so you may decide to ignore them, and that might be perfectly valid, and that might be a good idea in some cases, but again, it gives you that different view and can contribute towards those decisions. So I suppose a little bit in conclusion there, what everyone in the team needs is an EO. Every team needs a person who is going to say, oh dear, it can go very bad, what happens if? But we need that person. You know, you can make a bit of fun of it. You know, you're the designated Eeyore of the day or Eeyore for this meeting. You know, please challenge our assumptions. And a good team will, a good, you know, chair will say, actually, please do challenge it, because actually we're in a very dangerous situation here. There are a lot of consequences here, and the better our decisions are made, then we're going to avoid some of the downturns. Even the most successful teams make bad decisions and things don't get right. But I think it is, if you can be kind of self-aware on the group thing, if you can see yourself, we seem to be going in this direction, or, you know, we're taking decisions that's just morally wrong, then at least you can challenge them and say, look, you know, we've done a bit of training in groupthink. This is, we seem to be going down this thing. Let us wind back. Let us think. Let us be self-aware. And almost like if you're suddenly challenge it, you know, people might go, oh yes, actually, we are going down one of those particular 8 things with 8 symptoms. We are doing that. We need to think about that. And I think, you know, people are aware of the word and they know it's a bad thing. So linking it to groupthink, I kind of helps make it kind of more intellectualize it and make it more relevant, rather than saying, I think we're taking bad decisions. Well, you know, kind of who you to take bad decisions. So I think if we can kind of dress it up as this, I think self-awareness and teams being aware and just and thinking about their dynamics could actually often help say, yes, that's right, we need to rail back that, we need to think about it. So that is my thoughts on groupthink, and I think it's a good tool and technique for you to take forward either into your exercises or to just make that as a tool aware to your senior managers. So let's see if we can have some questions here. So how are we doing? Right, let's see if we can find some questions. Let's see, Andy Boyd. So you're saying to Jessup model is potentially too complex, will be outlined simpler tools. I think, as I was saying, Andy, the Jessup model is not potentially too complex for those that are trained to use it. I think it's too complex for kind of amateurs, people who are going to do half a day's training. I think we use a more simpler tool of kind of situation, direction, action. And so, you know, situation, really obvious, look at the situation, you find out what's going out there, you decide what you're going to do, an action. And so these are kind of these are decision, not necessarily, these are processes for managing incident, processes for managing incident. In terms of the direction, even with the Jessup model, there isn't a tool there, as far as I can see, that tells you how to make the decision. It will present you with the facts and it will present you with the variables, but in the end, I have seen very few tools which say, if you do this and you do this, you'll come out with a good decision. You know, there's the more information you have, the better decision we'll make, but I haven't really seen a tool which says, you know, if you follow these 5 practices, you will make a really cracking decision, because it doesn't really work like that. Is point 1 about invincibility or invisibility or both? I think it's about invincibility. It's where you've been successful and you've been successful in the past, and you basically think, you know, I was thinking Wolf of Wall Street, you know, that kind of, yeah, we've been really successful, it's going really well, but you take higher and higher risk. So I think it's invincibility is the problem. Maybe this might come into the Boeing thing, you know, we're a great company, we've got, you know, 50% of the world's flights, you know, we've got some cracking aircraft, you know, our Dreamliner has been really good, you know, kind of you know, we can't fail, we're doing a good thing. What's your view of Ed De Bono's 6 thinking hats and also OODA loop and helping invent a group think? Yes, I'm not terribly, but I know that Ed De Bono's 6 thinking hats is thinking in different ways, so sort of taking different personas. And the OODA loop is classic plan, do, check, act, situation, direction, action. It's almost the same as your Jessup things there. So they are all almost the same thing, giving yourself a sort of a methodology for doing it. I like the OODA loop and I teach it because I think it's a good way of doing. I think the thinking hats is quite good. It might be quite difficult to get yourself into the different modes for the thinking hats, but I think if you can kind of challenge yourself in a little bit of how you make decisions and try and say, can you see yourself, because we all have our kind of inbuilt bias, can you kind of take yourself out of your own inbuilt bias and take on another persona, and can that make you think about it a different way? So I like your hats. Yeah. Leonard there, would you agree in some cultures much more danger because of the culture? Yes, I think there can be world cultures. So if you're maybe a culture where, you know, certain countries, that does work in the Philippines, and the Philippines are very hierarchical, and so, you know, you never tell your boss bad news, you tell him bad news when you solve the problem. And so culturally that happens, so people don't want to give bad news. And also, you know, I worked in Scottish Power, or maybe Scottish, but this was you know 12 years ago, so I'm sure they've changed. But again, the culture was very, very hierarchical. So, you know, you again didn't want to kind of annoy your bosses, because if you annoy your bosses, then actually your card was marked, and actually, you know, your career was not going to be that successful. So you know, you can get the cultures, and I think that's where you know, you can end up. So in countries you can end up with cultures, and different organization can end up with cultures. So I think it is, the company culture can greatly contribute towards that. Peter there, would you agree that groupthink can also exist when the executive team lead and correctly doesn't encourage challenge or opposing views? I think you're absolutely true on that thing, Peter, and I think that's a very, very difficult thing to do, is to challenge the leader and say, you know, sir, I don't know how many leaders get called sir these days, but so, you know, I think you're wrong. And I think it is difficult in that, you know, you can have some autocratic leaders who are brilliant. You can also have some autocratic leaders who are not brilliant. And I think it is difficult. I don't think, you know, in the end, all this stuff is about people, and people are different, and some autocratic leaders do not like challenge. And not naming any in the USA there, but you know, that is, and it was interesting. I read about I can't remember, Felucci, the guy, the guy who's sort of leading on the science in America, and he said he's been quite famous at the moment for contradicting Trump on, very softly contradicting Trump on some of the things he's saying, but he knows. In this article, he was saying he knows Trump well enough, so he doesn't go say, like, that was wrong, you know, you were not telling the truth there. He praises him, he's nice to him and says, you know, I think this is not quite right, so you should consider this. So he knows the game. There is a game to be played with autocratic leaders, and, you know, you can kind of assert you're wrong, and then you'll probably be sacked. But if you can, you know, team dynamics work out the way of dealing with autocratic leaders, but I think it yourself, it is difficult, and maybe is more prone to this sort of thing. From a post, this is Kevin. From a post-incident recovery, do you see value in the recording of strategic decision making, the learn and gain from extent, the value evidence, the utilize of structured decision making? I think, you know, one of the things we teach is about decision making and recording of decisions and doing that. And I think there is a really value in that of recording why you did it, how you did it, why, on what evidence the decision was made, you know, what information did you know, and then in hindsight you can say, well, you know, we made that decision, but this piece of information didn't come in till next day, which if we knew, we would have made a different decision. So I think there is, you know, the police are very, very well of this, and so they're very good at this, and saying, we know if one of our snipers shoot that guy, that decision is going to be poured over. So we know that we've got to record exactly why we did it or why we go and raid that house, because they know this will come back to haunt them. So a good team will use their scribes and their admin people to record those decisions. The police will get it signed off by the leader. You know, that might be good practice, is to record that information to that, because you know in big incidents these things may or could very well come back to haunt you. And if you can understand why you made it, you know, either it's for own self-protection, but also the learning afterwards, the more you remember. It was a good thing. I went for a wee run yesterday, and I was reading a podcast, and one of the things they were talking about was to say there's a theory that in an incident, the only things you ever remember was the worst of it and the end of it. So once you know what happened at the beginning and what happened at other parts, everyone forget. So if you think about, if you apply to that theory, some of the decisions that maybe at the beginning may be forgotten about. So, and they may set the tone and set your response, and you may, you know, we decide to respond in this way and then we need to change tack. Then you've got why you made that decision at the beginning. So that's a good point, Kevin. Ewan, good to see you. 8 tips for debriefing analysis of specific decisions during the incident as a whole. It's an interesting one. I think discussion. I haven't had any thoughts, or actually, there's a really good point. I haven't really had many thoughts on that. Is how to debrief a decision. I think if you've got some information there, then you can play it back again, and maybe I'm just thinking out here. Maybe what you can do is when you make that decision, and then you know in the cold light of day, what you could do is maybe play it back and say, actually, let's have a look at that decision. Let's have a look at what we know, because hopefully you've recorded that thing. Let's look at it in respect of, was that decision successful? Was that successful actually disaster? And then you can actually play it back and say, actually, you know, can we see it in context of the whole incident, and play it back and see, actually, could we have done better? Was there something else that we should have known, could have known? So I think that there is worth doing it. It's a little bit as how much you want to get it, how much your sort of team is enlightened and kind of prone to be able to be self-reflect, or whether they want to like let's park this one because we didn't do very well. So I think it is possible to do that. I think you have to have a certain openness and enlightenment to be able to do that. That's a good point. I like that. Is there any more for any more?
I think we've actually come to a point where it's the end now. So I think anyone who wants to ask any more questions can maybe wait for another time, or they can email them in if that's all right.
Yeah, please email them in, or read the blog. So just put Groupthink and search through the blogs, and it's there, or read the paper.
So thank you very much, Charlie. Another great session. I'm just going to run a poll and see whether anyone is interested in changing the time of the webinars. And there is, I'm sure, is a reason for some people wanting a different time. But So if you can continue just clicking on the, thank you for everyone that's participating in that. I can see the results coming in. Thank you for everyone that attended, listened in and asked questions. If you know of anyone who may be interested in our webinars, perhaps friends or colleagues, please pass on the message. As we will be running as many as we can over the next few weeks. I believe there was a typo in one of the slides, so apologies. Actually, it was quite an important typo, so hopefully we'll send out the webinar will have a mend in it. As I mentioned earlier, you'll receive a recording of the webinar later today. In case you missed out on any of the content covered, all webinar recordings will also be available on our website. We are just in the process of scheduling some further webinars, and a list of these will be available on our website once the final details have been confirmed. We're also getting some guest speakers and presenters in, which should be good.
But if anyone thinks of anything they might like to do, I'm always happy to do or get some of the other guys of the team to actually do a webinar. So if you think of any subjects which are burning at the moment, then or something you just think would be interesting, I just like Ewan's idea there. So yeah.
So I will read the next bit, which does say, if you have any feedback on this webinar or any topics you'd like to be covered in future webinars, please get in touch, as we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll hope to see you at next week's webinar. I just was wondering whether we're just going to leave the poll up for a couple of more seconds. I was hoping that I think we might close it there. We've got most people voted now, and we're going to share the results because I love sharing results. And then we're going to let you go in a couple of seconds. So thank you very much for attending, and I'll see you at the next webinar. Thank you.